It was one of those slow, sunny mornings in Willow Creek, the kind of day when the town's small post office became the center of quiet activity. People lined up with their parcels, old friends chatted near the P.O. boxes, and the smell of brewed coffee drifted through the air from the cafe across the street. Inside, Postmaster Jim Daniels was finishing up sorting the last of the morning mail. At 58, Jim had seen it all: lost packages, impatient customers, even the occasional prank. But nothing could have prepared him for the storm that was about to blow through the front door. The door slammed open, and in marched Karen Hemsley, the self-proclaimed queen of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. She was dressed in her signature pastel blazer, oversized sunglasses, and clutched a thick HOA binder like it was a legal weapon. Behind her trailed two bewildered neighbors who looked like they had been dragged along unwillingly. Karen's heels clicked against the floor as she made a beeline for the counter. "Excuse me," she barked, startling an elderly man in line. "I need to collect all HOA mail. Immediately." Jim looked up slowly from the sorting table. He had a calm, tired patience in his eyes, the kind that only comes from decades of customer service. "All HOA mail?" he repeated. "Ma'am, can you clarify what you mean?" Karen slammed her binder on the counter with a thud. "All letters, packages, and correspondence addressed to the Willow Creek HOA. It's official community business, and I am the president." The other customers exchanged glances. A woman holding a stack of envelopes muttered, "Here we go again." Jim cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but federal law doesn't allow me to hand over mail that isn't addressed to you personally." Karen blinked in disbelief, then gave a condescending laugh. "Excuse me? I run the HOA. That means anything that comes to the HOA belongs to me." Jim shook his head gently. "That's not how the postal system works. If it's addressed to the HOA or a board member, only the listed recipient can pick it up, and only with proper ID." Karen leaned over the counter, lowering her voice but not her attitude. "Listen, I don't think you understand. The HOA manages everything in this neighborhood. The lawns, the fences, even the sidewalks. That includes mail." Jim's lips twitched with the faintest smile. "Actually, ma'am, this post office is federal property. HOA rules don't apply here." For a moment, Karen just stood there, blinking. Then her face reddened like a kettle about to boil. "So you're refusing an HOA directive?" "Directive?" Jim repeated, clearly trying not to laugh. "This isn't the Pentagon, ma'am. It's a post office." A teenage boy waiting in line snickered. "Karen's going federal today." His phone was already out, recording. Karen spun around, pointing a finger at him. "You think this is funny? You'll be laughing when your HOA dues go up." Jim rubbed his temple. "Ma'am, please step aside. You're holding up the line." Karen's voice rose again. "No, I will not step aside until I get what I came for." The younger postal clerk, Maria, glanced nervously at Jim. "Should I call someone?" Jim sighed. "Yeah, maybe call the regional office. Tell them we might have a situation." The murmurs in the room grew louder. People were whispering, snickering, and recording from different angles. Karen turned back to Jim. "You're making a big mistake. I'll have you reported to the HOA's legal department." Jim pointed to a poster on the wall behind him, a large one that clearly read, "Tampering with mail or interfering with delivery is a federal offense. U.S. Code 18, Section 1702. He looked at her steadily. "Ma'am, do you know what happens if someone tries to take other people's mail without authorization?" Karen's eyes darted to the poster, then back to Jim. "This is harassment. You're threatening me." "No, ma'am," Jim said flatly. "I'm warning you. There's a difference." Karen's face twisted with indignation. "You can't talk to me like that. Do you even know who I am?" "Oh, I do," Jim replied calmly. "You're the same person who called us last month because you thought the new mail carrier didn't look professional enough." The crowd chuckled. Karen gasped. "That's because he was wearing shorts. It's not appropriate for a federal employee. Jim crossed his arms. It was 98 degrees that day. Karen's lips pressed into a tight line. She suddenly raised her phone, aiming the camera at Jim. Fine, I'm documenting this. You're obstructing HOA operations and I'll be contacting my lawyer. Jim looked straight at the camera, unimpressed. You go right ahead. At that moment, an older woman whispered from the line, Oh, she's definitely going viral for this. Jim nodded toward the door. Ma'am, unless you have a pickup slip or ID for the specific recipient, I'll have to ask you to leave. Karen didn't move. You'll regret this. I know people. Jim's patience finally thinned. He pressed a button under the counter, a silent alert to local law enforcement. The teenage boy snorted, whispering to his friend, Oh boy, Karen's getting the federal treatment. Karen, oblivious, kept ranting. You're going to lose your job. The HOA will shut this place down. Jim smiled faintly. Ma'am, the HOA can't even get my parking lot repaved without permission. As her face turned redder, the sound of a police radio crackled outside. Jim looked her straight in the eye. Ma'am, I suggest you step outside before you make this any worse. Karen froze, suddenly realizing the gravity of the situation. For the first time, her confidence cracked. The door opened, and Deputy Ramirez walked in, hand resting casually on his belt. Everything all right in here, Jim? Jim gestured toward Karen. Just a misunderstanding about the mail. Ramirez smiled slightly. Ah, another HOA misunderstanding? Karen pointed furiously at Jim. He's withholding community property. Ramirez looked at her, then at Jim, then back at her. Ma'am, are you trying to take mail that isn't addressed to you? Karen's voice wavered. Well, it's for the community. Ramirez sighed. Ma'am, that's not how federal mail works. The room burst into soft laughter. Karen crossed her arms, humiliated but unwilling to admit defeat. This isn't over. Jim smiled calmly. It never is, ma'am.
Bro, imagine walking into the post office and just demanding everyone's mail like you are the CEO of the neighborhood. Jim handled that way too calmly. If that were me, I would have been like, Ma'am, this is the United States Postal Service, not your HOA meeting.
The next morning, the entire town was buzzing about what had happened at the post office. The video of Karen Hemsley's meltdown had already made its way around the local Facebook group, titled, of course, HOA Karen tries to take federal mail, fails instantly. The clip showed Karen shouting, waving her binder, and Jim standing calmly behind the counter like a sheriff in an old western. Even the town mayor had left a laughing emoji under the post. Jim, however, wasn't laughing. He'd been a postal worker for 30 years, and while he'd seen his fair share of difficult customers, yesterday's encounter had drained him. He arrived early that day, hoping for a quiet shift. The calm didn't last long. Maria, the young postal clerk, was already behind the counter when he came in. She looked up and whispered, You're not going to believe this, Jim. She's back. Jim stopped mid-step. You're joking. Maria shook her head. She's outside in the parking lot talking to some people. Looks like she brought reinforcements this time. Jim sighed, rubbing his eyes. Of course she did. Sure enough, through the post office window, he could see Karen standing in front of her SUV, arms crossed, talking animatedly to two other HOA board members. She had a folder in hand, and by the look of her expression, she was gearing up for round 2. Maria, Jim said, if she comes in here yelling again, just stay calm. Let me handle it. Moments later, the door swung open. Less violently this time, but still with that familiar Karen energy. Good morning, Jim said, as neutral as possible. Karen's smile was thin and brittle. Good morning, Postmaster Daniels. I've returned to resolve this misunderstanding from yesterday. Jim folded his arms. What misunderstanding would that be, ma'am? Karen opened her folder and slid several printed documents across the counter. These are the Willow Creek HOA bylaws. As president, I am entitled to access any mail related to the association. Jim didn't even glance at the papers. Ma'am, those are neighborhood rules. Federal law outranks HOA policy. Karen's expression hardened. I've already contacted our HOA legal representative, and they agree with me. Jim raised an eyebrow. Your HOA lawyer can't override the United States Postal Service. Behind her, one of the board members, a timid man named Tom Jenkins, whispered nervously, Karen, maybe we should just wait for the mail carrier. Quiet, Tom, Karen snapped. This is our matter. Jim stayed composed. Ma'am, I suggest you take this up with the local Postmaster General if you truly believe you have a case. Karen's nostrils flared. Don't you dare talk down to me. I know exactly how to escalate this. You're obstructing community business. Jim exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to laugh. Ma'am, yesterday you almost got cited for interfering with federal mail. I'm trying to help you not make the same mistake. She slammed her hand on the counter. You don't scare me, Mr. Daniels. I'll have the entire HOA down here if that's what it takes. A small crowd was forming again. A few regulars, the same ones from yesterday, had stopped pretending to browse stamps and were now openly watching the scene unfold. Jim kept his tone steady. Karen, I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm obligated to report repeated interference attempts. Her eyes narrowed. Report? To who? Jim pointed toward a framed certificate on the wall that displayed his federal badge number. To the Postal Inspector's office. And trust me, they take this seriously. That name seemed to hit her like a brick. The Postal Inspector? She repeated, faltering for the first time. Maria spoke softly. They handle federal mail crimes, ma'am, like theft or tampering. Karen blinked. This isn't theft, it's management. Jim replied coolly. Theft by another name is still theft under the law. The tension in the air was thick. Even Tom looked like he wanted to disappear. Karen straightened her shoulders, regaining a shred of confidence. Fine, if that's how you want to play it, I'll file a formal complaint. You'll be hearing from our HOA office soon. Jim nodded. You do that, and when you send that letter, I'll make sure it gets delivered. Properly. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Karen's face went red. She snatched her papers off the counter and spun toward the door, but just as she reached for the handle, Sheriff Brooks walked in. The sheriff was a tall, calm man with a deep voice that commanded respect without ever needing to shout. He nodded to Jim, then glanced at Karen. Morning, folks. We got another report of a disturbance here? Karen immediately went on the defensive. This is harassment. He's refusing to release official mail. Brooks looked at Jim, who simply shrugged. She's trying to collect mail addressed to other people again. The sheriff's face didn't change, but his tone dropped slightly. Ma'am, we talked about this yesterday, didn't we? Karen folded her arms. You don't understand. This is HOA business. Brooks raised an eyebrow. And this is federal property. The line of customers erupted in muffled laughter. Karen's voice trembled with frustration. You're all against me. The HOA has rights too. Jim leaned slightly over the counter. Ma'am, you're lucky the Postmaster General isn't involved yet. Brooks nodded toward the door. Let's step outside, Ms. Hemsley. We can talk about your rights out there. Karen looked like she might argue, but something in Brooks' calm stare made her rethink it. With a dramatic huff, she stormed out, again, slamming the door behind her. The moment she was gone, Maria exhaled. Do you think she'll be back? Jim chuckled, shaking his head. With Karen? Oh, I'd bet tomorrow's mail on it. Brooks smirked. If she is, tell her next time she'll be dealing with the postal inspector, not me. Jim grinned. Now that's a meeting I'd pay to see.
Okay, but how do you come back after getting kicked out by a federal officer and still act like the victim? Karen's confidence level is beyond science at this point. Postmaster Jim deserves a medal for not losing his cool.
By the next morning, The video of Karen's second post office showdown had officially gone viral, not just in Willow Creek, but across multiple HOA meme pages. The clip had over 50,000 views and a comment section full of lines like, "You can't out HOA the federal government." Postmaster Jim is the hero we never knew we needed. Jim didn't care much about social media, but he couldn't deny the entertainment value. Still, he knew this whole situation was far from over. He was right. At exactly 9:15 a.m., a black SUV pulled up outside the post office. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a gray suit, black tie, and polished shoes. He had an ID badge clipped to his pocket that read, U.S. Postal Inspection Service. Maria nearly dropped a stack of envelopes. "Oh my gosh, Jim. Is that who I think it is?" Jim sighed, straightening his shirt. "Yep, that's a postal inspector." The man walked in briskly, his expression unreadable. "Postmaster Daniels?" Jim nodded. "That's me. Inspector Daniel Ross, assigned to Region 4. I received your report about a repeated interference attempt. Thought I'd see it for myself." Maria whispered under her breath, "This just got real." The inspector gave the small post office a quick glance, the rows of P.O. boxes, the quiet customers pretending not to stare, and the Karen incident posters people had pinned up from the local paper. "Tell me what happened," he said, taking out a notepad. Jim explained everything, how Karen had stormed in twice, demanding the HOA's mail, threatening legal action, and trying to use neighborhood rules to override federal law. Ross listened without interrupting. When Jim finished, he asked one question. "Do you expect her to return?" Jim smirked. "With Karen, it's not a question of if, Inspector, it's when." As if the universe had been listening, the bell over the door jingled. And there she was. Karen Hemsley in full pastel glory, with another folder under her arm and that all-too-familiar scowl. This time, she'd even brought a man wearing a cheap suit, probably her so-called HOA legal counsel. Karen stopped dead when she saw the inspector. "Oh, good. I'm glad the postal supervisor is here. You can clear this up." Ross turned slowly to face her. "Ma'am, I'm not a supervisor. I'm a federal postal inspector." Karen blinked, caught off guard for the first time. What now?" "Federal law enforcement," Ross said simply. "And you must be Ms. Hemsley?" Karen puffed her chest. "That's right. HOA President, Willow Creek Community. I'm here to collect our organization's mail." Ross's gaze didn't waver. "And by our, you mean the Homeowners Association?" "Yes. All mail addressed to the HOA belongs to me, as the head of the community." Ross calmly flipped open his badge. "Ma'am, federal law states that mail can only be collected by the person or entity listed on the address or by an authorized representative with written permission from that entity. Do you have that?" Karen frowned. "The HOA is the entity." Ross tilted his head slightly. "Then where's the letter authorizing you to collect it on behalf of the HOA? Signed and dated by all board members." Karen hesitated. "Well, they know I'm the president." Ross's expression hardened. "That's not authorization, ma'am. That's assumption." The entire post office was silent. Even the humming of the mail sorter seemed to pause. Karen crossed her arms, trying to salvage control. "You're making this unnecessarily difficult. I've already told this man," Ross interrupted smoothly, "that you run the HOA, yes. You've also been warned twice that this is a federal matter." Karen's lawyer, a man who looked like he regretted his career choices, cleared his throat. "Perhaps there's been some misunderstanding. Ms. Hemsley is only trying to—" Ross turned to him sharply. "Are you her legal counsel?" The man nodded weakly. Yes." "Then I suggest you advise your client to stop interfering with federal mail before she's facing a Class E felony." Karen's jaw dropped. "Felony? Are you threatening me?" Ross replied evenly, "No, ma'am. I'm informing you." The crowd couldn't help it. A few people chuckled. Maria actually had to step into the back room to hide her laughter. Karen was fuming now. This is ridiculous. You can't treat me like a criminal for doing my job. Ross took a slow step closer. Ma'am, what is your job exactly? Karen stammered. I oversee community order. And that gives you the right to break federal law? Ross asked, his tone razor sharp. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. You're twisting my words. Ross nodded. Then let me be clear. If you step behind that counter, touch a single piece of unauthorized mail, or disrupt postal operations again, you will be detained and charged. That did it. Karen's face went pale. Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve. Ma'am, maybe we should go. She hesitated, clearly fighting the humiliation burning in her chest, then turned toward the door. You people don't know who you're dealing with, Ross replied coolly. Neither do you, apparently. Karen stormed out once more, slamming the door so hard the bell fell off its hook. Ross looked at Jim, who was doing everything he could not to grin. She's not going to stop, is she? Jim shook his head. Not until someone stops her for good. Ross pocketed his badge. Then that's what I'm here for. Next time she shows up, don't engage. Just call me. Maria peeked out from the back. Inspector, does this mean she could actually get arrested? Ross nodded. If she interferes again, yes. Jim leaned back against the counter with a sigh. Well, it looks like mail delivery just got a lot more interesting. Ross chuckled. Let's hope she takes the hint. But deep down, they all knew. Karen never takes the hint.
Yo, she really tried to fog HOA papers just to grab people's mail. Like, she actually thought the postmaster wouldn't notice the Canva logo on it. Rose was done with her nonsense at this point.
A week passed and life at the Willow Creek post office almost went back to normal. Almost. Jim and Maria were processing packages like usual, though every time the bell over the door rang, both of them would tense up slightly, just in case she returned. But instead of Karen, it was a calm week filled with regular customers, polite greetings, and zero HOA drama. Jim even joked, maybe she finally realized mail fraud's not worth her HOA newsletter. Maria laughed. Or she's busy writing a 5-page complaint to the mayor. Still, the quiet didn't last long. By Friday afternoon, a sleek gray BMW pulled into the parking lot. And Jim knew, even before she opened the door, Karen was back. She strutted in like she owned the place, holding an envelope high in the air like a royal decree. I have authorization now, she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Maria whispered under her breath. Here we go again. Karen slapped the envelope onto the counter in front of Jim. This letter is signed by the HOA board. It states that I'm the authorized collector of all community correspondence. That means you have to hand it over now. Jim glanced at the envelope. It was, indeed, signed by a few board members. But something about it didn't look right. The signatures looked suspiciously identical, and the official HOA seal was just a blue sticker that read, Community First. Before Jim could respond, the door opened again, and in walked Inspector Ross. Karen froze mid-sentence. Oh, not you again. Ross walked up calmly, hands behind his back. Good afternoon, Ms. Hemsley. I heard you might be stopping by. Karen glared. Well, I have proof now, legal proof. Ross picked up the envelope, holding it to the light. Interesting. These signatures look printed. Karen crossed her arms. They're digital. It's 2025. Everyone uses digital signatures. Ross nodded slowly. That's true. But federal forms require verified authorization, not a Canva sticker and copy-pasted names. The room went quiet except for the low hum of the mail sorter. Karen's face flushed red. You can't talk to me like this. I'm doing my duty for the neighborhood. Ross took a step closer, his tone calm but firm. Ms. Hemsley, do you understand what happens when you repeatedly attempt to collect mail you're not authorized to handle? Karen blinked. I'm just picking up mail. Ross's voice was low now. That's federal mail theft intent under Title 18, Section 1708 of the U.S. Code. And since you've been warned twice, it's considered willful interference. Karen's jaw dropped. You're lying. That can't be real. Ross motioned toward Jim. Postmaster Daniels, did I or did I not warn this woman 2 previous times? Jim nodded solemnly. You sure did. She's on camera both times. Maria chimed in. And she yelled at the mail carrier last Tuesday. Ross looked back at Karen. Ma'am, please step outside. I need to make a call. Karen clutched the counter. You're not serious! Ross said nothing, just pulled out his phone and stepped outside. Through the window, Karen could see him speaking clearly into the receiver. 2 minutes later, the sound of sirens grew faint in the distance. Karen spun around. Oh, you have got to be kidding me, Jim muttered. You brought this on yourself. A local police car pulled up, lights flashing softly. Officer Tanya Reyes, a familiar face from town, stepped out. She greeted Ross with a nod. Hey, Inspector, we got your call. Ross gestured to Karen. Same subject as last week. Attempted unauthorized access to federal property again. Karen sputtered. This is insane. You can't just arrest someone for picking up mail. Officer Reyes sighed. Ms. Hemsley, this is your 3rd warning in 10 days. We're not arresting you yet, but you are being issued a federal interference citation. You'll need to appear in court. Karen's jaw dropped. Court? Over mail? Ross replied. Over federal law, ma'am. Officer Reyes handed Karen a paper. Sign here to confirm receipt of citation. Karen reluctantly scribbled her name. This town is corrupt. You're all corrupt. Ross tucked his badge away. No, Ms. Hemsley. We're just following the rules, something you claim to care about. The crowd, yes, a small one, had gathered outside by now, chuckled quietly. A man whispered, Guess she finally got a taste of her own HOA enforcement. Karen stormed off toward her car, muttering under her breath. This isn't over. I'll report all of you to higher authorities. Ross smirked. You might want to start with your lawyer first. When she finally sped away, Jim and Maria exhaled in relief. Maria leaned on the counter. Think she's really done this time? Ross shook his head. With people like her, they never stop. They just relocate their chaos. Jim chuckled. Well, if she tries to run the HOA in prison, maybe she'll finally get to send some mail. Maria laughed so hard she nearly dropped a box of stamps. Ross turned serious again. For now, I'll file the report and have her flagged. Any future attempts, and it won't just be a citation. Jim extended his hand. Thanks again, Inspector. This post office owes you. Ross smiled faintly. Just doing my job. Keep the mail flowing, Postmaster. As Ross exited, Jim turned to Maria. You know what? I think it's finally over. Maria smirked. Until the next Karen shows up. Jim chuckled. Then we'll be ready, with a camera, a witness, and a fresh pot of coffee. The bell chimed as another customer entered, smiling. Hey, you guys got the famous post office from that video, right? Jim laughed. Yep, that's us. Maria added, Welcome to Willow Creek, where even the mail comes with drama. And with that, the little post office returned to its normal rhythm, though everyone in town knew that Blue Counter would forever be remembered as the place where HOA Karen met her match.
And that, my friend, is how HOA Karen learned that federal law, HOA rules. Honestly, this post officer deserves its own reality show. And that's the story of HOA Karen tried to run the post office like her HOA and got owned by the actual authorities instead. If you enjoyed that, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and tell me what would you have done if Karen demanded your mail. See you in the next crazy HOA story. Bye bye.